The Longsword. Perhaps if you played the original Xenoblade X or know anything about this game, you might be aware that the Longsword in Xenoblade X is probably one of the strongest weapons in any RPG period. Ether Blossom Dance used to be one of the go-to builds in the original game that could easily destroy basically everything, even the one singular enemy with 100 million HP, and now, because the Longsword was such a struggling weapon class, it got a couple new tools to work with too, including a new art, Hercules Blow, which has 2,400% hit scaling, and in many ways is even more ridiculous than Ether Blossom Dance was. Even outside of these aspects, however, the Longsword is one of the strongest builds period, combining so many of the most broken aspects of Xenoblade X that can allow you to very easily defeat anything in the game with little to no effort. And in this video, we're going to be discussing the Longsword, covering all of the strengths and showcasing the most effective build options for this weapon. While this isn't exactly a class guide, since I thought it would be best to cover one weapon at a time since you can mix and match the secondary supporting weapons, you can still somewhat use this guide if you are earlier in the game and on the duelist line and just want to see how and understand why the weapon works. If you enjoy guide content like this on Xenoblade Chronicles X and would love to see more on the other weapons, please do be sure to subscribe to the channel, as it does help me out so much. I'm getting very close to 100,000 subscribers, and a lot of my audience that watches these videos is not subscribed yet, and I would greatly appreciate it if you did, so I can hit that milestone. Let's get started. I want to make sure we cover every single aspect of the Longsword, so I'm going to make sure that we can cover every single art that the Longsword has, as well as the generally useful skills, and then get to the actual build options after that. So let's go ahead and start by discussing the arts that the Longsword has and which ones you may want to run. Starting things off, we have Offensive Stance. This is actually one of the major arts that makes the Longsword what it is. This is just an aura that boosts your melee accuracy and total melee attack while also increasing your damage taken. This is a very powerful effect. This aura offers a multiplicative increase to your melee accuracy up to 50%, boost your total melee attack multiplicatively 200%, and also at level 6 you will not even take any additional damage, not that that part actually even matters that much anyway. To get the level 6 effect of the art, you just have to use the secondary cooldown version of the Offensive Stance art. So you always get that aura tier +1, so it is level 6, instead of the art normally being level 5 and granting the Offensive Stance 5 aura. You can get the level 6 aura simply by using the secondary cooldown bonus effect. Also, the tertiary cooldown effect gives aura tier +2, but there is no level 7 bonus. It only goes up to level 6, that is going to be the maximum here. Regardless, this is an absolutely incredible aura that gives you so much additional damage, and like I said, it's one of the main things that makes the Longsword what it is. It's probably the best aura in the entire game. Absolutely run this on any serious Longsword build. Next up, we have Incendiary Edge. Now, this is a TP art that does thermal damage, and as such, it is automatically going to be not that useful because of that. Because ideally, we're going to be wanting to do ether damage, simply because ether damage is the best damage type in the game because of the skill Core Crusher, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But the fact that this is locked into doing thermal damage and not your attribute weapon damage means it is immediately going to be less useful, especially when you have another significantly better TP art. So we're not going to be worrying about Incendiary Edge at all. I would definitely not run this 99% of the time, unless you're really early in the game, you don't have Core Crusher, and you just need a TP art to have on your character. Rising Blade. This is actually not a bad art, it's just outclassed by some of the later melee arts that you get, but it does weapon damage, and when you are targeted, it will boost your damage 125% if you have it at max rank. This is not a bad art at all. It does some pretty decent damage, has a pretty short cooldown as well, and it can be very useful, especially if you're early on in the game. Like I said, the main reason it isn't really used on these builds is because of the lower hit count, meaning it's not great for building up overdrive. You don't have a more consistent way to build it outside of melee attacks. And it also just has pretty low hit scaling, so it's outclassed by some of the other arts that you get later. Next up, we have Defensive Stance. I would not recommend running this at all over Offensive Stance, since ideally your goal is going to be doing so much damage that you don't have to worry about defense anyway. Plus the fact that, well, there's so many ways to just kind of ignore damage in this game entirely that it really doesn't matter to just kind of reduce your damage taken and restore your HP. Next up, we have Tornado Blade. This is actually a staple on a lot of melee sets, simply because of how fast the art is. Now, the hit scaling is not the highest, but it does increase your TP when you have an aura active, so it's one of the best ways you have to just kind of make sure maintain overdrive, especially if you're running a build that doesn't have the easiest TP generation or the easiest way to maintain overdrive. Just having that art that allows you to gain TP really quickly is really nice to have, making Tornado Blade probably a staple on a lot of sets, especially if you're running the Ether Blossom set that needs potential stats on its armor augments and can't run some of the same things that the general melee attack set might be able to run. True Stream Edge is also a staple. It has 250% hit scaling, which is not bad at all, and also can give you a lot of TP when you have a really high morale level every time you get a hit, meaning that you'll get a lot of TP back every time you use it. And it's also a fairly fast art. Also does some pretty decent damage, one of the highest of the melee attack arts that you have. Usually another staple just because of the fact that it's easy to maintain TP, especially on the Blossom Dance set, and the fact that it does some pretty decent damage as well with 250% scaling. Next up, we have Ultra Slash. This has 400% hit scaling, and from behind will actually boost your weapon damage. This is actually a pretty powerful art, especially early on in the game. You can do a lot of damage with this art, and it can be very, very beneficial. Now, it is not really used on end-game sets because it doesn't really offer you TP, and it is not as fast as some of those other arts, but the fact that it can do this much damage and does have a really strong special effect when you can attack enemies from behind, and this does make it a pretty decent art. Next up, we have Samurai Soul. This will add AoE to melee auto attacks and boost auto attacks upon taking damage, and also reduce your secondary cooldowns. Once again, auto attacks are just not really a big source of damage in this game, and it's just not going to be nearly as good as offensive stance as an aura that boosts your entire damage by 200%, which ideally is going to mean that you're going to get a lot more benefit out of using that. So I do not recommend running this aura at all when you have offensive stance, which is just significantly better. Next up, we have Burning Slash. You pretty much never want to run this because the attribute is thermal. Even if you have a purple art for TP gain in Overdrive, you would want to run Magnum Edge over this because Magnum Edge is always going to be your ether element. If you are running a thermal art, you might accidentally break the appendage you are targeting, which could be really bad if you're trying to run a Core Crusher Appendage Crusher set. So you do not want to run Burning Slash because of that. You would definitely rather just run Magnum Edge. You don't really need thermal resistance down when you're doing ether damage anyway. You don't really need physical resistance down either from Magnum Edge, but the fact that it is a purple art, it is a way to get 1000 TP back in Overdrive, so you can activate Overdrive again or use offensive stance if you have maximum count, does make it useful to just have on solo sets that are having more trouble gaining TP because of their build. So Magnum Edge, pretty good for specific Overdrive sets, but it really just depends regardless. And next up, we have Blossom Dance. This is one of the two shining jewels of this set. We have a hit scaling of 700%, one of the absolute highest in the game, really, really strong, and it can nullify the target's attribute resistances, meaning no matter what their resistance to ether is, this will always do consistent damage. This is actually really nice because there are a few enemies in the game that have really high ether resistance. One of the two new super bosses, Ghost Super Bosses in Chapter 13 even, has 100% ether resistance when they activate an aura, meaning this is the only way to do any kind of ether damage to them with being able to nullify that attribute resistance if you can't lower it any other way. So this can be really nice to have. It is not completely outclassed by anything entirely new yet. There are still some situations where Blossom Dance is useful, and it is still one of the most powerful arts in the entire game. So if you're running a potential-based set, Blossom Dance is going to be your strongest option that you have. It works really well with offensive stance and everything else that the class has to offer. And overall, Blossom Dance is one of the absolute best arts in the entire game. And then finally, we have Hercules Blow. I just want you to look at the hit scaling for a second and compare it to everything else that you've seen thus far. All right, just think about this for a second. 2,400% hit scaling. This is absolutely absurd. This is insane. You don't even have to worry about the bonus effect. Even if you're not low HP, this is still going to absolutely truck every enemy in the entire game because the hit scaling is ridiculously high. You can think of hit scaling like a damage ratio. So this is basically just how much damage this art does when it's multiplied by your art, right? And this is crazy. It is only a singular hit, but it does an absolutely massive amount of damage. This is the reason you're seeing so many damage caps on the heavy hitter leaderboard, all those 9999984 values or whatever it is. This is the reason. This art is absolutely ridiculously strong. If it does have one weaker aspect to it, it's that the animation is about 5 seconds long, so we thought initially that Blossom Dance was still going to be better for RP gain on Global Nemesis and stuff like that, since this art animation is really long and you can probably get more consistent damage out of Blossom Dance in the same time period on the enemies that actually have enough HP for it to matter. But then we discovered that you can actually apply a DOT effect with this with using the knock and shock skill, and well, that was just kind of the end of it after that. It was kind of really silly and over after that. Yeah, this is probably the best art in the game now for actual damage. This is an extremely stupid, extremely dumb art, and it's just another thing that makes Longsword the best weapon class in the game. It didn't even need this, but it has this anyway now, because why not? Now, that covers all of the Longsword arts. However, we also need to talk about the supporting weapon. I'm not going to talk about all the arts on dual guns, because I'll save that for a separate video, but there are a lot of really useful supporting arts that you can get from dual guns that really compensate Longsword really well, and I don't want to show off dual guns as the support for every melee weapon, so I'll try to switch it up some. But typically here, Ghostwalker is just one of the absolute best defensive skills in the entire game. It gives you guaranteed evasion, which is one of the absolute best enablers for any build as far as just kind of making sure you can get your damage off without having to worry about taking any damage in return. There are other ways, of course, to make yourself invincible. This is just one of the absolute easiest in the entire game, but I'll show off those other methods in later videos. We have Primer, which is something that just grants you critical power and also increases your TP by 200. Another really universally useful art that you can use to increase your critical damage, and also just as a way to just kind of build up your count in Overdrive. It's really, really useful to building up count in Overdrive if you don't have a way to build it with the Overdrive count up and Overdrive gain TP like I'm using in some of these builds here. We have 0-0. This is a really nice art. It combines really well with Primer in order to just build your count very easily in Overdrive. It is 10 hits, so after Primer, it is 20 Overdrive count assuming all of the hits connect. And that means you can easily build up your Overdrive count to 100, just alternating Primer and 0-0, especially with Quick Recast, which makes it additionally very, very useful. The final art I'm running on this set is Combat Limbo. Now, this is more for Nemesis runs than anything, because it'll allow you to freeze all of your buffs and auras. And outside of that, you're probably not going to be running it too often, so you'll probably replace this with Magnum Edge or something like that. But it can be a useful effect just for the fact that it grants you the effect stasis and freezes all of your auras and buffs in really long fights. As long as you remember to activate specifically this buff, you can just kind of freeze all of your other buffs. Now, not Ghostwalker, though, because that'll run out as soon as you run out of Guaranteed Evasion, so you will have to manually activate that if you are doing a solo fight or something like that. Alright, so let's talk about skills now. First up, we have Core Crusher. This is absolutely mandatory if you're running any ether-based weapons, and most of the strongest weapons in the game are going to be ether-based because of this skill specifically. If you are targeting an enemy appendage, it will not damage the appendage, but you will do 150% primary damage when you're targeting it, and it is an independent multiplier. It is extremely powerful, meaning you do 2.5 times the normal amount of damage as long as you're using an ether weapon and targeting an appendage. This is absolutely an absurd skill. It is ridiculously powerful, and it also coincides really well with Appendage Crusher Augments, which we'll talk about a bit later. Absolutely run this if you can. It is really, really strong. After that, we have Aura Assault. This is extremely good. It compensates offensive stats really well. It's another independent multiplier that boosts your melee attack and melee accuracy by 30% when you have an Aura active. Very good skill to pretty much always have equipped here, and something that I think is always going to be beneficial and useful. I have Grand Procession equipped right now. This is specifically for the melee attack build, not for the TP build. For the melee attack build, you're able to run some specific augments that can make Overdrive basically free. So this is why I'm running this for the melee attack build. We'll talk about that a bit later, but this is a really, really useful skill to have just for being able to make Overdrive free and just kind of instantly hit max count on Overdrive if you have certain abilities attached to it. Mighty Muscle, for the melee attack build, you run this for the increased melee attack by 30%, to just kind of increase your damage even further. If you're running a potential build, if you're running the Blossom Dance set, you want to run Inner Search instead, I believe. I believe that is what it's called. That is the one that increases your potential by 30%. So you can increase your potential and your TP art damage by 30% if you're running that. Yes, it's Inner Search. It's 20% actually, but even still, you definitely want to run that. And then finally, on this specific set for offline, I'm running Supreme Sword, because this will boost your damage by 100% when triggering melee combos. So if you use your melee arts after using offensive stance, you're going to get a ton of damage out of that. This is an additional damage boost. This one is an additive damage boost, though, so it's not going to be the strongest effect compared to some of the other abilities, but it is still really strong. Some other really strong effects that you can have, of course, are background noise. This will increase your damage by 125% when you're attacking from behind, which is going to be even more beneficial. Secondary Accelerator is one of the absolute best general skills in the entire game. The only reason I'm not running it is because the enemies die before it really matters with the current setup I am doing for offline at least. But if you're doing Nemesis runs online, or you do not have the absolute strongest setup here, you're going to want to replace something with Secondary Accelerator because it'll allow you to use your arts a lot more often. Similarly, Fast Forward is an absolutely great skill for just kind of reducing arts cooldowns by 50% when you trigger a melee combo, meaning that you can use your arts even more often out of that as well. So these are two really strong and powerful skills if you're trying to get as much damage as you can. There are some other pretty decent skills on the Striker, Samurai Gunner, and Duelist class if you're specifically looking this at a class guide, but ideally you're going to want some of the skills from the other lines too because they're going to be more beneficial. The final thing to note is this Knock and Shock skill. This is specifically kind of broken with some of the new arts in the game and with Hercules Blow, allowing you to inflict Shock 3, which is based on the damage of the art that you did. So if you damage cap Hercules Blow and then trigger the Knock and Shock on the 18%, you're able to extend Shock with a skill, and then you are able to just kind of use Conduction Rise and some other arts in order to just kind of increase that damage all the way past the damage cap, and it is ridiculously stupid, and it is ridiculously dumb, and it can allow you to take a lot of art and Nemesis RP very, very quickly, and why I think they should buff the RP of the Nemesis. Alright, so with all that done, we should actually talk about the setup now. You're going to want one of two swords. You're either going to want the Bewitched Glaive Receding Rust, or you're going to want an Ultra Diamond Spot with specific traits like melee attack up or potential up. For the Bewitched Glaive, Receding Rest, you're ideally going to want at least weapon attack power up, but Ultra Fauna Slayer and Ultra Fauna Criticals could be good secondary traits to consider as well, since a lot of the strongest enemies in the game are Ultra Fauna. Now, which one is better than the other? It really just depends. Typically, the Spatha is probably going to be better for more general content, since not every enemy is an Ultra Fauna, and you can get the melee attack up or potential up traits on it, which can increase your total damage more than the Bewitched Glaive Receding Rust, despite the Bewitched Glaive having a higher weapon attack power. The reason for this is because melee attack and potential are calculated a little bit earlier in the damage formula than your weapon attack power is, so you'll get more benefit out of having those as additional traits on that. Regardless, though, the Bewitched Glaive is a little bit easier to obtain and a little bit easier than to get the required weapon attack power up trait on, just because one enemy will always drop this singular weapon, so you can always just kind of get this weapon pretty consistently, so it's something that I usually have been continuing to run just because I'm a little bit lazy, but, I'll probably get my upgraded Spatha eventually when I'm able to actually farm for that weapon and have the time to kind of upgrade that. But regardless, those are going to be your two really strong Ether Longsword weapons to consider running. Your dual guns, if you're running the melee build, there are two options for you. You can either run a 6 stars dual guns, I believe it's called Ultra Transient Sidearm, with the Appendage Crusher trait and with an Ultra Fauna Slayer trait, and that will be slightly better if you're fighting Ultra Fauna enemies than the 4-slot dual guns that I have here. However, if you cannot get that, then the 4-slot dual guns are going to be the best because you're going to get the most useful traits out of them that way. What you're going to want to do to get the 4-slot dual guns is you can't get them until the end of Chapter 13 and the Chapter 13-3. You will just need to go find characters as your party gets separated, and I'm going to leave it at that to prevent spoilers, but once your party gets separated, just go find and talk to characters, and you'll get all the 4-slot weapons that you need. Now, this is specifically for the melee attack build. If you want to run the potential build, you will want Ultra Nebulon Dyads with both potential up and potential boost. These are traits that you cannot put on your weapon as augment slots, and they are really beneficial to boosting your damage and your potential arts. So, you're definitely going to want to have Ultra Nebulon Dyads, ideally Ultra Nebulon Dyads 2 because they are ether-based, but Dyads 1 and 3 work if you're focusing mainly on longsword damage, because it becomes both potential up and potential boost to boost your potential stat an incredibly high amount, and this is going to be much more beneficial than the 4 augment slots for the potential set. So that is something to keep in mind as well. If you are running a melee set, you can also just run a headpiece that has Appendage Crusher on it. Any eye patch has Appendage Crusher on it, and this is going to be the most beneficial thing to do to increase your damage even further. Now, if you're running the potential set, once again, headpieces can come up with potential up and potential boost on them, and you're able to max these out and get a lot of additional potential that way, so you may want to run a headpiece with double potential up if you are running a potential set. That's going to be more beneficial than running this eye patch. As far as actual augments on your weapon, now, if you're running the melee attack build, you're still going to want to ideally run 4 Appendage Crushers if you're running the eye patch, just because that'll allow you to basically kind of get the maximum benefit out of it, since most enemies have an appendage with a softness of tier of 0, and you can lower that all the way to -5, doing an additional 2.5 times the normal amount of damage, which is absolutely ridiculous for how cheap Appendage Crusher actually is, and it compensates really well, and cooperates really well, I should say, with Core Crusher, allowing you to not actually damage the appendage, while still getting the boost of lowering the hardness tier of the appendages, so you get a bunch of additional damage. Melee attack up should probably be the other slots that you have, just because it'll increase your melee attack further and increase all the damage of your normal melee arts, right? And if you're running the potential set, you're probably going to want to run some different things here. Either weapon attack power, either ether attack up, appendage crushers are still going to be really beneficial. Obviously, you want to make sure you get to hit the 5 of those, but you can also run something like secondary cooldown reducer, so you're able to use your arts more often, and those are probably going to be the more generally useful augment effects. For your other pieces of armor, you're probably going to want to run a shop chest piece. For melee attack up, it's Sakuraba, and for potential up, it is going to be Candid and Credible. These are the best traits that you can get on your chest piece, since the drop traits are not going to be as useful as these are. So ideally, you just kind of run a shop chest piece. Similar to that, you're also going to do the same thing for the boots. Sakuraba for the melee attack, and Candid for the potential stat. Outside of that, you can get some really useful stats on the left and right arm. You can get max TP up on the left arm. You can get melee attack boost on that as well, which is really, really nice to have. So that is a way to get melee attack boost on your arm while also getting max TP up. You can also get melee attack up on the other arm while also getting overdrive count up. That overdrive count up is particularly useful for me because it allows me to build overdrive count just by activating overdrive. I definitely recommend trying to get at least one piece of gear with overdrive count up so you can have an easier time building overdrive. And with the overdrive gain TP build that I am running for the melee set, this is really, really useful to just kind of max overdrive instantly, which is really, really nice to have. For augment slots, if you're running the melee build and you are offline particularly, Overdrive Gain TP is an absolutely fantastic augment. It works really well with Grand Procession skill. If you run 5 of them, you now gain 3,000 TP per Overdrive activation, meaning you have made Overdrive free. With just 1 Overdrive count up, you're able to spam that and get max Overdrive immediately, which is really, really strong. It is a very good build. It can allow you to do a lot of really cool things if you're running specifically offline melee build setups, since you can kill enemies faster than enough that it matters. But if you're running online, another really, really good thing to consider is Aura Rapid Cooldown. If you run all 5 of these, you're able to just immediately get the primary cooldown of anything that you use, which is also really, really nice for just using arts as much as possible. And it's a pretty strong strategy for Nemesis runs, since you are able to do a lot of damage doing it this way. Max TP up could be one consideration if you want to run just one of those if you don't have it on any kind of piece of gear, but ideally your left and right arm are going to give you max TP up and overdrive count up, as well as melee attack up and boost, so you can do as much damage as possible. If you are running a potential build, you are going to unfortunately have to run potential up or potential boost in your augment slot in order to get the maximum amount of damage, so you're not able to run these more useful supporting effects. That also means you're going to want to kind of pivot and make sure that you're able to get as much potential as possible out of your gear, which means you're going to need to just kind of change how things work on your set. You can run some other useful skills on your augment slots for your actual weapons, though. Like I said, you can run secondary cooldown reducer there to get increased secondary cooldown. You can kind of just get rid of melee attacks and kind of do some other things that boost your damage further with general damage boost like Ether Boost, Ultra Fauna Slayer, or something like that. So that is something that you can keep in mind. But all in all, the potential set, while it does have some really strong damage potential and is really useful since Blossom Dance can ignore attribute resistance, it is going to be a bit less useful offline, but online it can still be pretty useful just for doing a lot of damage to Nemesis enemies, and Blossom Dance is still one of the strongest builds in the entire game, and I want to show off both in this video, so we're going to be doing that. Now that this is like 20 minutes long without me actually even getting to the demonstration part of it, let's finally get to that now. Also, as a note, let's say you don't have some of the really strong build options here. I'm going to do something special here, and I might actually fight some enemies without some of these augments equipped, just to kind of showcase that these builds and these ideas still work if you just kind of have the general knowledge and general setup here. So this specific clip was also showed at the beginning of the video, but essentially if you kind of stand near this rock formation and aggro the Telethia with your Ares and then get off at the rock formation, the Telethia should be in the perfect location where you can hit it with your melee attacks. And immediately I just get out here and I'm able to immediately use the Overdrive Gain TP augments to get myself to max TP instantly by just spamming the Overdrive button, because I can just make Overdrive free, right? Just from there, you just activate Offensive Stance, Primer, and press the Hercules Blow button, and if you have the exact same setup I do, the Telethia should go down in one singular hit as long as you are targeting an appendage, right? And yep, 11 million damage in one singular Hercules Blow. It is really just that easy. It's ridiculous. Same thing with Pharsis, the second highest leveled super boss in the game. Well, former second highest level super boss in the game, I should say. Once again, just spam that Overdrive, get the Ghostwalker out, just make sure you don't die immediately, and then you can just Offensive Stance into Hercules Blow, and you should be pretty much good here. Now, I'm going to use Tornado Blade and True Stream Edge just to show that you don't even need to use Hercules Blow, because yes, this build is just that strong and that powerful with all the aspects to it here. And that is what I do. Tornado Blow and True Stream Edge also give you some TP back, which is really nice. So now I have that TP back as well, right? The only thing to keep in mind specifically about Telethia is that it can reflect Ether if it does reflect Photon instead of reflect Element at the start of the fight. So you might want to have a Nullify Ether Reflect augment just in case, but if you just wait for the Reflect Element instead, you can just immediately not worry and just immediately use the exact same setup I do without having to worry about getting one-shot. So here's Pharsis again. I'm going to showcase this time that Hercules Blow will one-shot it. If you are targeting an appendage, the wing particularly are the weaker appendages. I believe the chest is like a stronger appendage because it's one of these Ultra Fauna enemies, so I believe his chest has, her chest has a stronger appendage hardness tier. But the wing, if we target that, it's really not that hard. You can just immediately do that 11 million damage again. And yep, that is really all there is to it. So these two enemies, while they do have a decent amount of health, they don't have nearly as much as Gradavis the Headless Emperor, who is much lower level but has 100 million HP, which is significantly more. So I do want to kind of show off just kind of a fight against that enemy as well here. Once again, start the fight the same way. The Overdrive Gain TP augments and Grand Procession just make Overdrive free, and just with one Overdrive count up, instant max Overdrive. Really, really nice to have. Activate that Offensive Stance, activate, and then go into my melee art combo. And yeah, I'll be doing a lot of damage. It about half of his health in one singular combo like that. Now I believe he gives himself an aura, which means he's going to take some reduced damage here from everything else that I do, because I'm not going to be able to get the remaining amount of his health in the little time we have left here. For Gradavis in particular, you are going to want to make sure that you use Ghostwalker at smart times, because he's got some multi-hit attacks that can very easily eat through it. So you're going to want to wait till he uses one of those multi-hits and reactivate Ghost Walker just to kind of make sure that you're able to get that damage. I accidentally deactivated Overdrive, by the way, but you know what? It doesn't matter because I can instantly get back to max Overdrive anyway. I've still got Offensive Stand active, and we can just continue the fight as normal. So even if you accidentally make a mistake like that, it doesn't matter. Like I said, I just instantly had to activate Overdrive. I'm already back to max anyway. So I just go right back into my combo, and I just go right back to doing a decent amount of damage to him. Now, I believe Azor once again cuts the amount of ether damage that you do to him, which is why this is going a little bit slower now, but it doesn't really matter once again because I'm still able to just kind of kill him with absolutely zero effort here. Now, if you had Blossom Dance, you'd be able to do consistent damage still, I believe, because that ignores attribute resistance. That is something to keep in mind as well. And just for the sake, I want to show you something. So look at how I've removed basically all of my augments except for just 2 appendage crushers because they're really, really cheap. I'm going to show that you can still do these builds and just do these strategies just fine without that. And that all that really matters is just kind of understanding how the multipliers work and just kind of understanding how the game works. And you can still have plenty of success even without the exact strongest build that I have. The one thing I did replace was get Magnum Edge over Combat and Limbo in case I need to build TP with that, but I don't even really need to with the setup I'm doing. So I activate, or aggro Farsus, get out of my skeleton, and immediately activate Ghost Walker so the ether field does not kill me immediately. And that we're pretty much fine from there. I just activate Overdrive once. I can't spam it because I don't have any Overdrive gain TP augments anymore. But I can still just kind of alternate Primer and 0-0 here to build up count very, very quickly. This is a very useful way to build up your Overdrive count. And it allows you to just kind of build that count up really fast before you have to worry about the duration. And then once you kind of get to max count, it's very easy to keep up duration from there with blue arts, green arts, and really even reactivating Overdrive, you can just kind of use your purple art to do that. So I make sure to reactivate Ghost Walker, activate Offensive Stance once I'm at 91 count. And you can see, even with all those melee attacks gone, even with no Overdrive gain TP, just kind of the general ideas and setup still works. Now, obviously, I still have some pretty good gear. Like, I've got a Receding Rust, I've got some melee attack up on my gear itself, and that's going to still make me do a decent chunk of damage here. But even if you don't have that stuff, you can still have plenty of success on these enemies just by kind of understanding how the game works. Alright, so let's show off the Blossom Dance, Ether Blossom Dance build. This is the potential build. Now, this is not the maximum amount of potential I can have. This is definitely a lazy setup. I didn't even go and upgrade my augment slots on my diodes here. But even still, 600 potential, 593 potential, that's enough. That is absolutely enough to just deal with most enemies in the game just fine. I do replace Mighty Muscle with Inner Search here, though, because I do want to have that extra 20% potential here, which will increase that even further. But regardless, though, I'm going to go and fight Farsus one more time here and show you that Blossom Dance still can get the absolute job done with just a general amount of potential here. Blossom Dance, I believe, hit 6 times total, and I believe I only needed 4 hits to kill Farsus here with it. So once again, I do the exact same kind of strategy. I can build up my Overdrive count with Primer and 0-0. Speaking of which, for Blossom Dance sets like this, you can also run Overdrive count up on your weapon slots, and you can hit max Overdrive much quicker in these fights if you want to do a faster build, depending on if you're running more gain TP up augments like I do on some certain sets with Blossom Dance in the previous game, which I'll show off one of those with Gradivis at the end here, since I've shown that off in many videos before. Once I get to 95 count, I figure that's enough. Activate Offensive Stance, activate Magnum Edge just for some TP back, and then go into Blossom Dance. And you can just see, well, yep, once again, Blossom Dance easily gets the job done. And that's consistent here. Blossom Dance gets the job done in the previous game. I don't have the setup for this right now, but you can see I can one round Gradivis with one singular Blossom Dance with the right setup. With Arena using Inner Search or Inner Focus on me, whatever raises my TP, I forget what the art is called right now. And with the right weather, Gradivis can go down in one singular Blossom Dance. So, really, really cool. Anyway, Longsword is absolutely the most busted, most broken weapon in the entire game. Anything you want Longsword to do, it can do very, very well. This video is really, really long already, so I think I will probably cut it here. I hope you did learn something from watching this video, and I hope you are converted to understanding that Longsword is easily the best weapon in the entire game, because man, is it strong with both of the build options that you can go. Melee attack, potential, it's really, really broken regardless. If you did enjoy the video, do be sure to like, comment, subscribe, make sure to share with your friends that are new to the game. I do appreciate all the support that you guys give me, and I will be looking forward to making all the other weapon guides in the future, so do please look forward to that. With all that said, thank you all so much for watching, have a wonderful rest of your day, and hopefully I'll see you back here soon.